get started. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Ask the Experts, Opportunities and Challenges of AI in Finance. The finance industry is at the forefront of a digital transformation, and artificial intelligence is playing an increasingly important role in this evolution. We put together this fireside chat today to explore the opportunities that AI presents in our industry and the challenges that must be overcome to leverage it. Our experts today are Khaitan, CEO and founder of Quolum, and Glenn Hopper, CFO and author of Deep Finance, Corporate Finance in the Information Age. Our moderator is Sanjay Krishna, head of growth at Quolum. Quolum is a SaaS procurement provider that helps companies save time and money for purchasing SaaS products using software for managing enterprise-wide SaaS contracts, payments, and renewals. We'd really like today's fireside chat to be interactive, so please feel free to add questions into our Q&A box at any time, and we'll be sure to answer those live throughout the presentation or at the end. So with that, I'll pass things over to Indus.
Thank you, Emerald. Hey folks, my name is Indus. I work for Quolum. At Quolum, we sit at the intersection of finance and AI and IT and procurement. And we thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to bring the AI discussion into the mix. So today we are talking to Glenn Hopper, where we'll discuss the magic happening and the intersection of AI and finance.
Hey,
I have a short agenda. We will touch upon some topics. In our prep, Glenn and I have included some slides to guide our conversation. Let me introduce Glenn to you. Glenn, great to have you here. You have had a very illustrious career spanning 20 years working across various companies, and you authored this fantastic book, which I luckily completed over this weekend on Deep Finance, and thanks for writing that one. Glenn started his career in US Navy and has a degree from Harvard University. Let's dive in. Before we dive in, let's have a poll question. Isn't it interesting how ChatGPT has taken over our lives, Glenn?
It really is. It's funny. I was looking at the question on this and thinking of the hours saved per week is offset by the hours spent researching additional generative AI tools that are out there. And so I think that there is maybe a productivity gain that is being replaced by trying to read every paper that comes out on generative AI these days.
Yeah, quite a bit of our lives. In fact, Sanjay and I have started using ChatGPT a little bit here and there to assist us in writing content. Unimaginable 3 months ago.
Well, let's see what we got. 1 to 5 hours is 83% and more than 10. That's going to be a watershed moment when it gets to more than 10 hours, isn't it? I mean, could you imagine picking up that percentage of your time in a week?
That's amazing. Yeah, easy couple of hours shaved here and there, AI assisting all of us getting our jobs done. So Glenn, the slide that I have, and you and I chatted about it earlier, there's a huge amount of increase in AI chatter, and these two bubbles are indicative of that. What gives?
Yeah, I mean, so artificial intelligence in some form or fashion has been around for a while. And then even modern AI has been around for a while as well. I mean, with machine learning and the neural networks that have been out there and people have been using, but the explosion of AI conversations since the release of ChatGPT, and then to some extent the previous large language models as well, but ChatGPT is the one that seems like it's really taken the world by storm.
And you shared this next one earlier, where the number of papers, which you and I kind of riffed on quite a bit, how did people realize that this watershed moment is going to happen in 2023 and everybody was just writing papers up until this time?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the insiders and the people the engineers who were working on these models and working in the field saw what was coming and realized the power of this before we did. But I'd like to know that with the pace that they're coming out now, like I saw one, I've bookmarked it this morning, but one on Hugging GPT, which is the Hugging Face, where it's a model aggregator, but a super interesting paper. But I wonder, I mean, how long have they even been working on that? I think the pace that these are coming out is incredibly quick. Everything around large language models and generative AI is moving so quickly right now because has captured so many people's attention, and you have people taking it and applying it in new ways. And all these papers are on that, on finding novel uses for it.
And were all these papers building upon each other, like drawing ideas? And while there's quite a bit of citations, but are the ideas kind of like a foundational layer? One I know is the transformers, but how about the others?
Yeah, I think a big one that I've seen a lot of, I mean, to some extent they are building on each other, but I'm thinking of the recent papers that I've seen. The last three that come to mind are on LangChain, which is how you can get the large language models to interact with big documents. And then another one I've seen is having AI agents interacting with each other without human prompting. And then that Hugging GPT that I was talking about from this morning. I mean, I think the foundation of all these is these large language models, but people are taking and building and doing, it seems daily, new and novel things with them.
Got it. And to give another perspective on the academic activity is the venture activity. The number of startups that have raised money, getting funded, just ballooned in the last 90 days, notwithstanding the downturn that we're seeing across the board.
Yeah, and when we were looking at this yesterday, I think one thing that makes this feel a lot like the beginning of the .com bubble. So if you look at all the investors in this list and look at the stages, these are all seed, Series A. They're all, I mean, there's a couple in pre-seed. I mean, there is investment going into very early companies right now. So the money is going to drive the development, and this is all going in now. So it's only going to accelerate. You saw the papers that were coming out. I think you're going to see a new product curve coming out like that as well, the hockey stick and new products that are rolling out based on this technology.
So do you think compared to, and I'll bring a point from 2013, 2014, we saw a huge amount of growth in software as a service, or SaaS. The software as a service inflection point was generally compute and availability of EC2 as from Amazon and other easy to build products, but it was not backed by any academic research. And if you compare that to the internet, it was backed by a lot of academic research happened at Urbana-Champaign and other labs at Berkeley, at Stanford. So do you think this is comparable to what happened in 1994, 95? Because there's academic research, there's money flowing in, hence a lot of companies are being born.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just a matter of degrees. I mean, the certainly software as a service really changed and created a whole new industry and made managing existing businesses much easier. And I think that was maybe, if that was a trickle as it grew, and it's pervasive now, but just the pace that we're seeing here, this is, I don't like to speak in hyperbole, but I can't help myself when we talk about ChatGPT and this technology. It's just, I think, I mean, I've been around long enough to remember going from a manual typewriter to a word processor to a computer to 95, the internet, and the web browser, and moving through all these technological layers. And this is to me has the potential to be bigger than all of those.
Very interesting. But the question then comes in that the chatter on AI and ML has been there for last 15 years or 10 years, with, dynamic pricing on Uber. We talked about this. The feed on Facebook gets much more attention than everything else. So machine learning has been there for quite a bit. So what changed that all of a sudden there's a huge amount of interest?
Yeah, and I think back to, do you remember the Netflix prize, the $1 million if you could come up with a machine learning algorithm that was better than their recommendation that they were doing? So, you know, at that
2003,
time,
right? 2004, somewhere around that.
yeah, I think that is right. Yeah. And it's like thinking about that when people were first that aren't in the industry were first hearing about machine learning, they thought, okay, somehow they're going to use statistics to tell me what movie I need to watch. And it wasn't accessible to people. They didn't understand how like Facebook is, they knew that they were getting similar content, but they didn't really understand what was going on behind it and maybe didn't care. They were just passively sort of consuming it. Oh, Amazon thinks that I should buy, new charcoal to go with my grill or whatever, whatever recommendation is there. And they just probably pictured just some kind of rule-based engine that was doing that and didn't think about, all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. But it has been impacting our life. And if you think about self-driving cars, I mean, how many people give any thought to what actually is going in with the convolutional neural networks or whatever that are, image processing and all that. And then for me, one of the biggest ones, you have it on here, is email spam detection. Like, I didn't understand at all when I was working in telecom when when the first spam filters came out, and I did not understand at all how they were working. And it's now you think about how far that's come, and it really impacts our lives every day. So, I mean, there's all this stuff that was going on that we could just sort of be passive consumers of, and certainly the ads that we receive from all the social media companies and on Google web searches and on every website we visit have been very tailored using AI and machine learning, but we hadn't really thought about what's going on. But then you get ChatGPT, and you can interact with it, and you can see it's way more accessible to me than people trying to understand what's going on under the hood with these other products.
Very interesting. Now, dovetailing that into finance, that we want to talk deeply about, and I personally thought that it's all about numbers, spreadsheets. How can you use AI on top of it? I am an Excel jockey and my macros are the best in the world. But I saw some samples as you shared earlier. I was like blown away. I said, how is that even possible? How can GPT read these numbers? So give us a little bit sense of how have we seen the history of AI in finance, Glenn? You've been very close to this topic for the last 10 plus years.
Yeah. So the honest truth with AI and finance is it's very nascent for what is actually what we're practically using that is AI. I mean, I think around the time that I wrote the book, RPA was probably state of the art. That's the coolest technology going on in finance back then. But we're about at a new wave right now. And I think it's important to maybe, as we think of the history of AI and finance, to look back and say, well, we had to do a lot to get here. So if you think back to, I mentioned going from a typewriter to a word processor to a computer. So early automation of accounting tasks is sort of a step one. And with the automation comes the collection of some data. It's locally stored. There's not much to do with it. But then the next iteration, these accounting tools move from desktops and servers into the cloud. And so now you have the ability to aggregate a little bit more data, and you can, because you've automated some of these, what used to be very manual journal entries and tasks that you're doing in accounting and finance, now you have time, you have more data, you have more time to look at it and start transitioning to a data-driven decision-making organization. And as that happens, the power of the finance and accounting functions gets larger, that they start to integrate more with operations. And as finance and accounting integrate with operations, then you start to gather even more data. So you maybe only used to have your general ledger information, but now, because you need to come up with your customer acquisition cost or whatever, you're going further downfield and you're going up or upstream. I'm mixing metaphors here, but you're going further upstream, and maybe you're collecting data when there's a lead and a prospect, and now you have more data to put in, and you can start building more. You can start building better models because you have this new data that has correlations that can fuel the models. And as the amount of data we have hits this tipping point, suddenly now we have enough data that we can start applying some of these machine learning algorithms to it. And I'm an FP&A guy at heart. That's my favorite part of the job. So that's always where I go at first, is thinking about, with this, whether it's internal, external data, the ways that I can build cooler models that are based on more data than just doing a linear regression or whatever.
Interesting. In your book, you touched upon quite a bit on automation, and it's dovetail into ERP, which is the foundation line item of automation as RPA in ERP. What have you seen the vendors doing to adopt, or at least at the inflection point? Are you seeing some tea leaves out there that we'll see this getting adopted in large scale?
Yes, and I never want to get on any of these webinars and promote any particular products, because also there are so many people that are doing something here, and it's kind of a dogfight right now to see who's going to win. But I mean, there are so many tasks, the repetitive manual tasks that are being replaced, and are only going to be, the types of tasks that are being replaced are going to keep moving up as these AI models get smarter and smarter. But I think about automated bookkeeping and bank reconciliations and journal entries and tax compliance. I mean, that's an interesting thing that we're going to see, is the application of, I mean, this is a very good job for computers to do, is thinking about whether it's SEC or tax filings or whatever, things that are standard format that just have to go get the information and fill them out. That's one that's going to be coming up pretty soon on the chopping block, I think, for something that some human activity that can be replaced by a machine. Data analytics is only going to get more and more powerful. The more powerful that these models get, the more compute power is available. Real-time financial forecasting based on, you don't have to wait till the month end close, because you have data every day of the month, every hour of the day. So taking that data and breaking it down that granularly, it makes it much easier to start doing real-time forecasting. And fraud detection is a big one, which we could do a whole episode on fraud detection. But I think of other AI. I mean, I could go on all day. AI, AR, AP, just the mindless work that took up a big part of our job is going to keep getting reduced and reduced.
So let's go deep into some of these. You touched upon some of the examples of how we could apply, AI in finance, and you mentioned some of these, including, better reporting from public companies, fraud detection, and many others. Is there a way to categorize? Because me as an outsider to finance, I sometimes get confused, like, what are the three broad application areas? Is it like, hey, fraud and audit? Is it automation of earnings, interpretation of earnings? For me, like, the CEO goes out on a quarterly call, spews out like a 15-page document. I have no idea what it is, but GPT summarizes it and gives me, oh yeah, buy the stock. That's what I need. What are the 5 or 6 broader areas you would touch upon?
Yeah, so no part of F&A to me is immune to this. So you go to accounts receivable, invoice creation, tracking payments, and there's already tools out there that actually, probably every area I hit, there's already tools out there that do it. But in accounts receivable, tracking timely payments, communicating with clients who are slow paying, and sending invoice reminders. And this all used to be very manual, and the automation of AR lets you, maybe 80-90% of accounts receivable is now automated. So that lets the human part of it focus on the 10% that are really slow paying or that have big invoices outstanding. Same thing with accounts payable, processing invoices, coding invoices, running them through the approval process. There are tools out there that help with that already. And I think of the general ledger accounting and going through the close process. And there has been a trend, and I think only the larger companies are really able to do this now, but there's been a trend for several years, and a goal in all this to have real-time close. So you're not waiting, so obviously closing or shortening the close process is a huge goal for any finance and accounting team. But if you can have a continual close because everything is just immediately transacted, then you don't even have to wait till the end of the month to update your forecasts and financials. But yeah, so you get in, all the accounting functions, and then you get into the FP&A. Well, if you know, once you've identified your metrics, and we see this already in dashboards with, I think of dashboards now and as two-dimensional displays of our information. But if you have a fine-tuned chatbot that is fine-tuned on accounting rules and is also trained on your company data, the idea is you see something that stands out on your dashboard, and maybe you can drill 1 or 2 levels deep on the dashboard, but to really get an answer that now you have to put a report request into the reports team to find out the information. I see very soon availability of tools that will let you just, like your Amazon device, whether in spoken word or typing in a question, and instead of waiting however long it takes to compile a report, the AI just goes and pulls that information immediately. So this is, that kind of real-time information really shifts for the users. It shifts from the time that it took us to assemble all this data and put it in reports. Now, if we get that instantly, then we become much more strategic, and our time is freed up from the work of putting the reports together. So yeah, but then and then to your point about earnings calls and listening to them and making a determination, there's also whether it's investors, a board, or stockholders, the vast amount of data that's out there, and trying to make a determination about it. I think of Goldman Sachs analysts and the time that they spend combing through footnotes on financial statements, and how much that can be shortened by the technology that's out there now.
I haven't played with Bloomberg GPT yet. I want to do that whenever it's available. And that's one of my fancies. Can I go back in time and figure out what happened in the real world based on the earnings of a public company? So that's like a wish list.
Yeah, and that's so the Bloomberg GPT, and that is one of the papers that I actually read the whole thing because it was so close to home. And I should have gone into it realizing this, but I read most of the way through the paper before they said, and for that reason, we're not going to release it publicly. And then I realized that their proprietary information, that's going to give them a competitive advantage. So unless they have for now determined that that's more valuable than releasing it to the public, even at a subscription of a couple $100 a month or whatever they would charge for it. They feel like because they've controlled the corpus of data that it was trained on. So obviously it was trained on the colossal data sets and that all these other LLMs are, but then because they've controlled and had internal information to train it, they said that that's part of their secret sauce now. So I don't know if we'll ever get a vision of that, but to me, that means there's opportunity for someone else for plenty of other people to go. And there is plenty of financial, whether it's SEC filings and publicly available news stories and all that, there's enough data out there that someone else could train a very similar model based on the publicly available data.
Got it. Before we go into the next slide, and we're going to talk about a very interesting topic there. Any questions from the audience, Sanjay?
Yeah, so there was one question that came up incidentally, which was quite similar to something that Glenn had alluded to earlier, where someone's asked about whether these applications of AI in finance will change how outsourcing happens in the finance industry. Because I think could be a reference to partial CFOs, could be a reference to bookkeeping services, and so on and so forth.
Indus, I'll take first crack at this if you want. I saw a product demo the other day where someone is already trying to do this, and it's a product that's focused on startups who, startups are so busy determining who and what they are, and they don't have, in those very early stages, the ability to afford a full-time finance person, and they're focused on their product and all that. But this tool that I saw is trying to automate as much as possible, letting founders go in and create their, by asking in natural language questions about what their spend is going to be and, what they've raised. And it helps them figure out their burn rate, and that what they just released last week or the week before was an integration using vectoring and embeddings so that it could actually, they used LLM or ChatGPT to look back at this company's data, and you could ask it questions like you would, the product pitched as like you would a CFO, but I don't know, it's not quite there yet. I think it's like you would maybe a junior analyst or an intern maybe, but that might be enough. But you could ask questions of could we afford to make this hire if we increase our marketing budget by 20%? What's the impact on EBITDA and stuff like that? So it's like I said, it's in its nascent stages, but it's there. And but I do want to put a dig in for us finance and accounting people. These tools are very powerful, but just like ChatGPT can, GPT-4 can pass the bar exam, this tool could regurgitate GAAP, GAAP rules, IFRS rules, whatever they are. But if you are not a lawyer and you're not a finance and accounting person, or you're not a doctor, or whatever specialized career path you're in, or if you don't have someone in that role, it's hard to know what questions to even ask it. I'm not saying it'll never be there, but I think that for people who otherwise may not be able to afford any finance and accounting help at an early stage, I could see this being a nice tool for them as a stopgap. But I'm not trying to learn a new skill and change careers yet. I don't
I think I totally agree with that. I think we will see. I'll take your point that you made earlier on automation. I think what we suffer is lack of automation. We suffer poor software, and that adds to the drudgery of not getting that on time, or it takes a lot of human work to get things done. So good quality product layered on top with some of the AI advancement we're seeing. Of course, services and outsourcing, I don't think it's going to go away. Specialization will increase, as you mentioned, Glenn.
Exactly. Yeah, and I keep preaching this, and I'm going to preach it until the robot bangs down the door over here and tells me I'm fired. But it's for now, and to me, for the foreseeable future. I've been wrong before. It's one of the worst things you can do is be recorded somewhere making your prediction for the future. But to me, for the foreseeable future, it is not yet man versus machine. It is humans and machines working together and using these tools that are out there. It's hard to picture exactly which jobs that I could say right now that can definitely go away today. We're going to just completely turn that over to the robots. It's changing, but for today, yeah.
Which brings to the most interesting conversation happening in media in the last 90 days after ChatGPT became popular. Am I going to lose my job? Is he going to lose her job? Or is she going to lose her job? Are we going to lose the jobs? Is this real? Is this the new sort of transformation where, my favorite example is, when containers were invented, when, ships became fully automated, longshoremen, people who were unloading, loading cargo, they lost their jobs. And of course, we got modern transport as we see it. Is that the inflection point?
Yeah, so every technological revolution has resulted in a shift in how people work. I mean, it would be easy to go full Luddite here and go smash the looms and go break into the OpenAI headquarters and smash their billions of dollars of servers. And here, I mean, to me, the biggest example, that was a great example. And then the one that always stands out to me is in the last technological revolution, thinking back 100 years ago, a little more, 80% of the population in the US worked in agriculture. And then as that became automated, people moved to cities, lifestyles changed, the nature of work changed. And then you think about, how changes that were made in manufacturing throughout the 20th century. And but we couldn't have foreseen what the future would be. I mean, we can make guesses now, but even OpenAI, speaking of papers, and their paper, I think it's been several weeks now, but they said 80% of the US workforce could have at least 10% of their work tasks affected by this. And that's, back to our poll at the very beginning of thinking about how much time you can save in a given week using ChatGPT. So for now, it's like a superpower for us, but people are going to find ways to be more productive and maybe do more with less. But if that opens up opportunity for people to be more strategic and to do a different kind of work, I mean, I don't have a clear enough crystal ball to know what that is. But and another stat from that paper, and I don't know if it was in one of the headlines, but it was something like 1 in 5 workers will see at least half of the tasks that they do in their daily job impacted by it. And I think that's true. I just, and then one more fact I've got to say, because we thought, I think people in white collar jobs always assumed that because if we look back at the last century, that the more manual tasks were the ones that were at risk. But now with the nature of what ChatGPT does, it's the higher income jobs that are at greater risk. So, I'd say artificial intelligence is here and robotics is here, and maybe AI will help design better robots. But we thought we were safe. Knowledge workers thought we were safe for a lot longer than now it appears we're going to be.
So basically you're saying I should buy a 10-acre land in the foothill of Sierra Nevada, up 150 miles east of me, and start farming.
So yeah, it'll just flip the script and we'll all go back to 80% agriculture again. Yeah.
So one question that comes up very regularly, and this is a whole episode, but I want to get your 60-second take. Is UBI going to happen in our lifetime? Is that real or just a eyewash going around?
I mean, so there was Sam Altman on a recent interview. It might have been when he was on with Lex Friedman, but talked about UBI. And so OpenAI has this grand vision where it's a redistribution of wealth, and it's such a hot button topic that it's hard to talk about anything because everybody has very strong political views on UBI. You wonder what our future would look like if algorithms and robots are doing all of our jobs. How are we going to spend our time? How are we going to, and I'm not saying whether anyone should or should not, but I think a lot of us do define ourselves by the nature of work we do. And if that goes away, where's our focus going to be? And if there really were not, if something didn't come out of this, as it has in every preceding technological revolution, then it would be something to seriously consider. But I lean more on the optimism that human ingenuity and advancement, that we're going to find new things to do, and that we're not ready for UBI yet. And then there's the whole question of the feasibility of, how would you pay for universal basic income? But there are a lot of people, there's probably as many papers on UBI out there right now as there are on the LLMs themselves.
Got it. So one another topic of interest on AI is this whole notion of ethics. If my models are biased with a data set that is for a specific cohort, the results would be for a specific cohort. The famous example is if you feed the model all cats that are black in color or all dogs of a certain breed, it'll only recognize a specific type of animal. That's the starting point. What do you think in terms of the larger play of ethics in using AI?
The biggest issue right now is who bias is likely in any model that you build. So, if you try to ask ChatGPT how to build a bomb, they've put in guardrails and it's going to say, don't build a bomb. I'm not allowed to tell you about that, even though it's read enough data, it knows how to build a bomb, but it's somebody put the guardrails in. So if you had a non-fine-tuned model, it would pick up, all the good, bad, and ugly of all the digital text in the world, and it could speak to it, and it could, based on the amount of data it had and how it was weighted in the training process, you could have a evil machine, or maybe something that's not blatantly and overtly evil. You could just have these biases. I think was it Amazon years ago that tried to use AI in the hiring process, and they used the employees that were there, they used their resumes to train the algorithm, and they ended up being very biased towards, I don't know if it was white males of a certain age or whatever, and it would kick people out that didn't match that. So that was unintended bias that came up, and in any model that you build, it's going to be there. So it's interesting to think OpenAI started as with the idea of coming up with these guardrails to put around it to decide, how we should move forward to ensure that this bias is out and that it's an ethically sound system. But now the question is, who should make those determinations? Probably not just the staff at OpenAI, but conversely, is it our elected officials? Is there some commission? You could diverge into political discourse on this pretty quickly, but the narrative of whatever the political narrative of the people who are training these models, that's going to bleed through, and who's to say what's right? And I don't think anyone has a good answer yet. And that's why people called for, a pause, whether you agree with it or not, was let's stop and figure this out. But the genie's out of the bottle. I don't know that anyone thinks that really is going to happen now, but it's a problem that we certainly couldn't solve in this webinar, but it's going to be one that we've all got to stay focused on for years to come.
Absolutely. And I want to keep our optimism alive in what the AI could do for us, or specifically the evolution of machine learning into GPT using the foundation of transformers that were built in by many of us that contributed or derived pleasure in terms of building or applications on top. So if I'm somebody listening, how can I make all of this actionable?
And I talk about this, the book was written a couple of years ago, so ahead of all this, but I talked about sort of the broad umbrella term of digital transformation and how you can get buy-in at your company, and how you can take on small projects first to get to show as proof of concept, and then expand the reach of technology in the company. And I think your 1, 2, 3 here is exactly what anyone who's trying to think about how they could use ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence in general in their company. I've got to say that number one has been a passion for me. It's why I wrote the book Deep Finance, and it's why a few weeks ago I put out, it's a free ebook. It's like 30 pages, but it's called Demystifying Artificial Intelligence. And it's supposed to be a guide for lay people to understand what's going on, because I see that when from reporters interviewing, whether it's Sam Altman or whoever in the AI community about these large language models, the reporters don't understand what's going on, and they're not even asking the right questions. And if anyone is thinking about using this technology in the workplace, they have to have a fundamental understanding of what it is. Otherwise, just shake a magic 8-ball and wait for the answer to pop up. I mean, it's just to rely on something that you don't understand is dangerous. So I think it's very, very important to understand what is the change that's going on, and not just say, oh, here's a new tool, let's throw it at everything. Understand what that tool is foundationally. And then you can ask number 2, as you have here, how can I exploit this change? And then it's, what are some items I can look at in my business? And then how can I get others bought into this plan? And you and I talked about that Harvard Business Review article the other day. And I think that is, it's the easiest.
I have it here.
Yeah, here, perfect. Yes. And Harvard Business School, they love their 2x2 matrices. So it's all laid out right here in four panels. And I think that because there still are problems with accuracy, and these models hallucinate and they give you errors as if they're, very confidently give you errors as if they're fact, that when you're trying to figure out what you can look at, that maybe you could throw Chat GPT at, or any other machine learning or artificial intelligence tool, that you have to think about what the demand for this task or application is and what the risk is. And the ideal task that you would throw it at would be in that top left quadrant: high demand, low risk. Marketing, you might throw away some marketing dollars if Chat GPT gets it wrong, but arguably, what's the saying that I know I waste half my money, or half the money I spend on marketing is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. So, people right now on hunches, and that's getting more data driven too. But marketing is not going to be a high risk area. Corporate learning was another good example. Copy editing, code reviews, ideation. I mean, these are all areas right now, because this technology is so new. That's a great place to focus. But in the bottom right there, that's low demand, high risk. That's the quadrant you'd want to avoid. But here's an interesting thing: they list niche medical as high risk, low demand. But for years, medical data has been used. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the studies on reading X-rays, and how AI is repeatedly doing better than humans at reading X-rays and finding early stage cancer. I mean, so it is high risk if you miss that, but there's also human error in that. So it's going to be interesting as this evolves, and as we get more data and these models get trained more and the trust goes up, where yes, that's high risk, but I'd say the demand is also there. And we're still, though, we're at human and machine. So it's, but at some point, you got to assume that that's another area that'll be in danger as well.
Yeah, so Sanjay and I are experimenting mostly on the low risk ones right now. Some of the things that we are doing, but this is absolutely fantastic. As we kind of wrap up this discussion with you, Glenn, it's amazing how all of a sudden we got hit this by meteor on our heads in the last 90 days, not on anybody's agenda or roadmap, but all of a sudden there's a line item at the board level, there's a line item at the product level. Hey, we got to do something about ChatGPT or GPT as a model. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. Before we wrap up, Sanjay, do we have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, just one final question. Again, very interesting. And Glenn, would love your take on this. I think, again, you alluded to it in part earlier, but again, there's a deep dive potentially is, will AI affect SMBs or small enterprises disproportionately? Or do you also see use cases for, let's say, very large teams or complex enterprises, which may be on, let's say, the FP&A side, like you mentioned, in terms of complex modeling requirements?
Yeah, that is a great question, and one that is very near and dear to me, as I've spent the last 20 years at startups. And for SMBs, you don't have the quantity of data that a Fortune 1000 company would. So if you can use the data you have, and you can add external data in there and try to work with that. But and I have no one has done this yet that I've seen, and I really think that it's coming, and probably sooner than later, because every time I make a prediction on how soon something's going to be here, it comes in 1/10 of the time that I saw. But for SMBs, I think that what's going to happen is someone's going to come along and be the QuickBooks of machine learning and AI for small businesses, because alone, they don't have the data to make decisions. But if you have an application that has, so maybe you're a regional dry cleaner company, or maybe you've got, 3 dry cleaning stores, and that you don't have a lot of data. You have your, you know how many transactions you do and how many articles of clothing you clean, and you can make decisions based on what you have. But what if you were on a platform that had dry cleaners from around the world, and you could use the data that's anonymized and aggregated across that to make more data-driven decisions, and to drive decisions from everything from staffing to where you build your next location, to how far locations should be from each other, to what demographic decisions are. And that's just all data that small businesses don't have. So I think there is an opportunity there to for someone to aggregate that. And it's like anything that relies on the content from its users. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. You'll have to build the platform. The platform will be empty in the short term, and it'll be less valuable until they get a critical mass on the platform. But I think, if you look at any of these SaaS tools that have been around for a while, and how much more valuable they've become over time, it would be the same situation there.
Fantastic. So that wraps up our conversation today with Glenn. Glenn wrote this fantastic book. I have it on my table, Deep Finance. We'll be sending out 10 copies to the attendees randomly. Glenn, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. All of you have a great day and a great weekend ahead, and we'll chat some more in future.